Welcome to another installation of Transitions in Leadership. I am Omiyemi Green, Professor of Theater and Africana Studies at William and Mary and Provost Faculty Fellow. This time I am with Assistant Professor of Acting, Jeremy Gillett from the University of Kentucky. And unlike our previous installations of Transitions in Leadership, this time, this is a conversation between two members of the Association for Theater and Higher Education. And given that we are in two different places in our career profile, Jeremy is going to ask me a number of questions about professional development as it relates to our field. So first, welcome, Jeremy.
Hey, thank you for having me, Omiyemi. Thank you for having me, and thank you for shifting the paradigm a tad bit so I can glean a lot of knowledge from you about your process.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's go ahead and get started. You've given me a list of wonderful things to think about, and so let's just go ahead and start with our dialogue.
Absolutely. So the first place I want to start with is the tenure process and departmental expectations. And so I want to understand how you approach the tenure process when you first started.
When I first started,
Hmm.
my understanding of the tenure and promotion process was, I don't think, as clear as it has become since I have switched institutions. When I started my career, I was a lecturer at Morgan State University, where I had a great time teaching a number of classes with students from Morgan. I then went on to Chicago State University, which would be my first tenure track position. And so being a lecturer versus being a tenure eligible faculty member are two different titles, come with two different sets of responsibilities. And the first one is primarily teaching. And in this other one, you have responsibility for teaching, research, and service. My time at Chicago State University was very much guided by a document that we called the Departmental Application of Criteria, or DAC for short. And it outlined the range of expectations for each area of consideration. And it also had a range of activities that one might engage in with a particular point value assigned. There was a little switch to, what became ultimately superior or excellent or exceeds expectations, meets or does not. And so those who were responsible for evaluating my performance in each of those areas would then evaluate the range of activities I submitted for their consideration according to how they were perceiving it within the department, and then it went on beyond the department. So the DAC was really helpful in helping me get an understanding of where I might want to focus my attention in the range of activities that I would perform. And then when I came to William and Mary, my understanding of the process was very much shaped by an initial conversation I had with the chair, who gave me an overview of the kinds of activities individuals within the department performed in each of the areas. There at the time was not an equivalent to the DAC. Right. And so I entered into this period that I won't say was loose, but I had to trust the process, so to speak. What I have found at different institutions as I spend a little more time thinking about this particular question that you've posed is that I would encourage faculty who are just starting off in the process to see if there is an existing equivalent that is offered by their provost office, some understanding of what those expectations are for tenure and promotion. And there generally is a document of some kind that is offered out of the provost office that is also similarly drafted from the deanery as well. And as our colleagues and yourself are moving through that process, that document usually comes into play at some point, right? It may be a topic of consideration with the University Retention, Promotion and Tenuring Committee. It may also be if there's any kind of preparing for tenure, preparing for promotion workshop offered by your dean's office. It may come into play there as well, but there's nothing that precludes you from accessing that document. It's usually online, and taking a look at it really early on in your career, and you can use it as a guiding metric.
That's good. That's really good. That clarification on how to really clarify the expectations of your DOE distribution of an effort. So as I think about that, what steps and strategies or habits did you take to keep yourself on par, on course with fulfilling that DOE? So once you walked away from all of these meetings and you took those workshops, how did you keep yourself on track?
So the DAC was really helpful because with the DAC, I could target my focus, right? So if I knew that performing at a professional venue external to the university was going to garner the most points, I'm just using this as an example, then that's where I would focus my attention. If I knew that publishing a book chapter was going to get me more points than X, then I would focus my energy there. And in the absence of a DAC, the conversation that you have with your the chair of your retention, promotion, and tenure committee, with your department chair, with your dean. I did have a conversation with both my dean and chair in the same room early in when I got to William and Mary, to say, hey, this is how I see my career moving, and this is where I plan to focus my energy. And so, given that I was part of the historian crew, right, in my unit, some who did some of the things I did and others who didn't, the question came up, well, are you going to focus more on direction, as some of the other historians have, or are you going to focus more on dramaturgy? And I said both. Right. So I see as I move, I may do a little more than the other of both, but I'm going to do both. And that was really helpful, so that by the time, and interestingly enough, in my case, the dean that I met with at the time, which I think was the dean of educational policy, right? And my current department chair, the dean of educational policy, was actually on the RPT by the time I came up for full professor.
Good.
And so I can only imagine that, they remembered that initial conversation about how I planned to spend my time as they read through all the materials that I submitted. So being really proactive and clear about your own goals, feeling self-directed and feeling empowered, I think, to be self-directed and very, articulate. Having as many having as many conversations as necessary. I'm not talking about, articulation of words. I'm simply talking about, having the conversations often and being really clear about your own goals and plans, I think helps as you are navigating the system, and being really clear about what those expectations are and how your plans fit into the expectations, right? Assist, that's a strategy.
Right.
You have assembled all the documents, then you can plan, actually map out the vision.
So once you have that vision and you're implementing your strategy, or you were implementing your strategy, when you went back to meet with your dean or the chair of your department and you looked at your DOE, how did you begin to advocate for the distribution and fairness, within your workload as in juxtaposition to or in conjunction with your research?
Yeah, that's real. And I actually am in a really unique position because I love that you're asking this question now. I became really articulate about that question when I became an associate.
Mm.
And at that time, I literally had mapped out a 5-year plan, right? The minute I became associate, I went to all of my colleagues in my unit and I said, what would you like to see in my dossier by the time I come up for full? And everybody had a little bit of a different vision, interestingly enough. And when I say everybody, I'm talking about the colleagues that I knew that had already, reached the level of full and who would then be responsible for, shepherding that case through the department and on to beyond. And so everyone had a little bit of a different vision. And so again, as I recommended to you, I went back to the documents. I kind of mapped out what I thought I was going to teach, new courses I wanted to develop, how those courses were going to be in conversation with plays that I wanted to direct on the main stage, knowing that there's a process to get on the main stage, right? You had to write a play proposal, it had to go through the committee, that kind of thing. Having an idea of some of the service expectations that I had maybe begun, but that would continue over a 2-3 year period. Some of the leadership roles that I had assumed at that time. I was also program director for Africana Studies for the duration of my time as an associate professor. And so, and I also had some other research goals as it relates to writing. Coming into William and Mary, there was no expectation that I publish because I came in as a director and a production dramaturg. And so there was clear expectations around those two areas. But when I ran into some of the challenges around the distribution of effort, and I love that term, the way you phrased it, when I ran into some challenges with the distribution of effort as it related to directing, I then started writing and publishing. That was the strategy. It was also medicine, and we could talk about that at another time.
Sure,
But the
sure.
publication, for sure, was the strategy to get around the inequities I was experiencing around that distribution of effort. And trying to, I don't have a problem advocating for myself. And my suggestion is those that may not feel as comfortable doing that, you get really comfortable with doing that, right? Because at the end of the day, all roads lead back to you, right? And so I always would continue to take the opportunity to say, hey, but if X doesn't happen, i.e., I'm not participating in the main stage season, and if that's an area of research consideration, we have to figure out how to address that structurally, given the new challenges we're introducing around, who gets to participate, in the main stage season, for what reason, and all the things. Publication offered me some freedom, right? It was freedom, it was medicine, and it was the strategy to get around that. And so by the time I came up for full, we had this new element of research that had not been part of the conversation as it relates to my own profile as an associate, and as coming up from assistant to associate. And I classified it as another form of dramaturgy, just to make it a little seamless. So, there would be institutional dramaturgy and production dramaturgy and structural dramaturgy. And so I found a way of organizing the contents of the profile to fit in those 3 areas. And here we are.
So just I want to circle back on something you said that was really poignant. Freedom of publication, that freedom that publication, allowed you. But also I imagine there was some level of cachet with that publication. How did you begin to discover that though you had to pivot to scholarly work as a as an author, when you pivoted there, when did you realize that within the academic realm, publications really are helpful in helping you maneuver and navigate the tenure process if you aren't able to be a practitioner because of your DO?
So first I want to lift up the name of an ancestor, and that would definitely be Paul Carter Harrison. It was my time at the NEH Summer Institute at Emory in Atlanta on Black aesthetics that gave me the tempering necessary, that opened up another avenue of research production for me. What I don't want to do in this conversation is privilege that which is written over, performance of scholarship. I think that they are both equally valuable, although I know that in some rooms that which is written is privileged over
Mm.
that which is performed or disseminated orally. And that's something that historians, and particularly those who do research on African American theater and Black theater, have navigated since the beginning of time. We can look at our theater history books. Perhaps some of the more current ones may have addressed this, but some of the ones that we have used traditionally, right, have not really delved into that inequity. So I first want to make that disclaimer. That said, that avenue kind of opening up for me enabled me to be in community with another set of colleagues here at my institution, right? When I became an associate professor, I had also been jointly appointed in Africana Studies. So I became an associate professor in 2016. I was jointly appointed in Africana in 2013. So I was an assistant at the time. When it came time for merit review and, tenure and promotion review, the publications was something that I think some of my colleagues were able to then say, aha, I recognize this, right? I know how to evaluate this in a way that sometimes evaluating a performance, in my case, is just different. It's not less than, it's just very different. It's because performance is ephemeral, we then are relying on external reviewers to come to an institution to take a look at a performance, to then talk about how the work done was creative, impactful, spoke to the metrics of the field, talked about your ability to get students from point A to B, how you may have incorporated theory into the work, and, was it sound? Did it move knowledge forward? We're relying on those documents. In the absence of that kind of extensive and copious review, then, we might be relying on a reporter to come who might not have the same kind of dramaturgical acumen to really talk about that performance in a way that a retention, promotion, and tenure committee needs to understand to move a candidate from one level to another. Scholarship production, because we know it's peer reviewed, we know it has been vetted, right? And so again, your colleagues, your dean, your provost, right? They understand that, I think, in a way that they may not as it relates to performance. And it's not that all deans and provosts, because I've worked with some really great ones who really did have a command at all institutions, right? Who really did have a command of, what we do in the arts, and an appreciation for it, and we're great advocates. And so I would also say that part of the strategy of navigating the process is to make sure you know your dean, make sure you know your provost, right? I had some of the best deans. Ones who would tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, I thought about you when I saw this and I think you should go, need support. Or I even had a dean who set me up for a little bit of a challenge. And she said that, as I was becoming the director for Africana Studies, she said, my only worry for you is not about your ability to lead the program. I only worry that your pursuit of a full may, lag, right, as a result of the responsibilities that come with leading a program. And because I like a challenge, I always had that in the back of my mind. And
Mm-hmm.
so just about a week or so ago, I sat down to look at my CV, and I reorganized it, took some things away, and I organized it according to what I accomplished as an assistant, what I accomplished as an associate, what I accomplished currently or to date as a full professor. When I look at what I accomplished as an associate professor, I know part of what was driving me was a little bit of, she gonna be able to do both, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Timely, because we know in our respective institutions that sometimes there can be a really large group of associate professors that have not, for one reason or another, transitioned to becoming full.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? And I know that her concern was not, it was rooted in, it was genuine, right? And I think
Right.
she was deeply worried, right, that I might become a member of, the group of associate professors that just don't move on to the next level. And I know that I'm an ambitious person, and my intrinsic motivation is high. And I think that for any of us in this career, we have to be deeply intrinsically motivated, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if we're always trying to get the carrot, when sometimes the metrics are changing, and there's all kind of things that are happening within the academic enterprise that are not within our control, right? So if you're not intrinsically motivated through the process, it's easy to take your eyes off the prize, the internal prize, that is.
Right, right, right. Which is the greatest motivator and fueler for an academic and an artist at heart, artist, right?
Mm-hmm.
We motivate ourselves. And so it seems as if we're landing in kind of the advancement and preparation conversation. And in retrospect, I want to know, how did you find the balance between your research, teaching, and work responsibilities when you were looking to advance? Because I'm not sure how it is at your institution, but I have 10% of service in my DOE, 50 teaching, 40 research, 10 service. In service, I find myself doing more than 10% of service. And so, but that service is not weighed as heavily in the external review process as your research and your teaching. But I find myself doing more than 10%. So how did you find the balance between, without me knowing your DOE, how did you find the balance between your creative work, your research, and your teaching?
So the understanding for the distribution of effort here is 40 teaching, 40 research, and 20 service. That's really formulaic, right? I'm going to tell you that I worked on the things that were important to me. I worked on the things that were important to me. When I became an assistant professor, I also became president-elect of the Black Theater Network. And usually that is something, leadership of a professional association, that you might see at the level of associate. But the Black Theater Network has been a wonderful training and nurturing ground for its members. And I was certainly one of those who benefited from great examples of leadership before me, and people who took me right under their wing, and people who saw things within me that I might not have seen in myself, but that needed to be nurtured for the things that would come later on down the road. And so moving into that kind of leadership role early in a network around a topic that was deeply important to me was a practice and a value that I moved right on into how I navigate the tenure and promotion process at William and Mary, which was to work on the things that were critical, that I thought were important to fulfilling my overall vision around belonging and inclusion. And it's a way to get people to know who you are. So when they see your file, right, they're not just seeing papers, they're not just seeing, which in this case, because I had moved away from the hard copy dossier, which is what I had prepared at Chicago State. I had 2 big old binders with the plastic sleeves and all of that, to, a Blackboard site, that's prepared by institutional research. And, it's not, I mean, there's some pictures, but you're not in the pictures if you're a director, right? You're looking at a bunch of students. And so it was a way for people to get to know me, to know, what I stood for, what my contributions were in real time through service at the institution, and to put all of that in perspective when they were reading, my file in accordance to, the rubric. So in terms of so that's how I navigated the distribution of effort, right? And I think everything tells a story, which is kind of why I revised my CV in the way that I revised it, because you can kind of see the story. I'm a storyteller, you're a storyteller, right? And so I think the CV should also tell a story. And I think that story is clearer when you look at how I have revised it currently. And then, because I'm also a culture bearer in a West African spiritual system, I also believe that we are who we are for a particular reason, and that, there is work for you to do wherever you are that is uniquely yours, because you have been prepared to do it, and no one will do it like you. And so I think that also has played a role in some of the service activities that I've chosen to engage in. But again, I think my service is directly related to my research and is directly related to the things I teach, right? So I see all 3 of them working together as a pie. And sometimes they're feeding each other. You can see the through line. And so it gets hard when you start trying to apply a formulaic approach.
Right.
To, something that is interconnected.
Let me tell you how important that statement was, the clarity that you just gave. Sometimes as an assistant professor, I'll speak for myself, I can't speak for all, but you see that formulaic process, 40-40-20, 50-40-10. And from an actor's perspective, you try to find jobs or gigs to fit the service, to fit the teaching. I found myself running aimlessly and taking on things just to fit that 10%, just to fit that 50% teaching, and say, hey, it's on the resume. And what you've just done is you put into words very clearly that if you focus on what you care about, your research, it will inform the service, it will inform the teaching, it will inform the creative work, and you'll find yourself just doing, and then you can extract and say, well, this actually was a form of service when I went to the National Theater Black Work Network. This was actually creative research, but it's all stemmed from what it is that we're passionate about. So that was really, really impactful, not to look at the DOE as I have to just fill this quota and do things, but let what you're doing be birthed out of your research, essentially what you care about. That was really good, really, really good. So as you went from assistant to associate to full, how did you begin? And let's just talk about assistant to associate or wherever. I don't want to limit your thoughts. You got some good stuff there. Tell me about how you prepared for the external review process. Can you share what that was like? And I imagine it was different at assistant. You're more informed at associate. You have more relationships. You know, saying this is who I want you to reach out to for full. What was that process like from assistant to associate?
So at that point, I was being evaluated on direction.
Mm-hmm.
And so I prepared statements of approach for each show. I did give a couple of names of individuals that I had met through conferences, but were arm's length from the work, meaning that we hadn't worked on anything together. We weren't publishing or working on a show together. And so there could be that necessary level of objectivity.
Mm-hmm.
And then my list of names, they came up with who they were going to pick based on the names that I had given and a list of names that they as in the department had. And so I don't from there, then they sent their external reviews, back to the department, and then they were redacted and then sent to me. And so I would read them and make any notes about, how I was going to move forward if there was an area of concern with the next production. Largely my ERs were, pretty favorable. I did have one where we just disagreed on a choice that I made in the show, and they read it one way and I saw it another way. I keep those things in context, just like I do student evaluations. You got to have thick skin, right, to do what we do, because we are under constant evaluation, whether it's from our students, whether it's from our peers. I mean, we are wearing our hearts,
Right.
on our sleeve because we're deeply connected to our work. But we also have to be really strong in how we handle any feedback given to us, right? We can still agree to disagree and be respectful. I appreciate the process of peer review, whether that comes in the form of an external reviewer coming to see your work, or whether that is someone who is reviewing something that you've written under consideration for publication. And because sometimes we can be deeply attached, so attached that our scope of vision, is really, really narrow. And, having someone who is not attached to the work in the way that we are, is helpful for our own personal growth. And so the preparation came through the relationship building, for sure. And then by the time I had become an associate preparing for full, I was taking a bird's eye view for looking at my career, and so my dossier was very different.
Mm.
It was very different because I spent a lot of time talking about my vision, which was kind of coming into formation, right? When I got here, like I had some idea of the things that I wanted to do, but when I was able to look back, I was like, oh, like I had so many experiences, had, presented, I had built up a confidence in a way that I don't think was present when I started, on the track as a lecturer. But by the time I was going up for full, it was just, and we were also navigating COVID. So our world was shifting. Everyone was having to pivot. Everybody was having a reckoning of some kind. People were standing on business, whatever that business needed to be. They were standing on it. And I don't know. I was in a very different place. And so my dossier looked very different in a way that I just brought a clarity to everything. And so I started from there. And it actually was very much shaped by things that my grandmother and, some of the elders in my family, right, had said to me about how to show up and navigate space and how to conduct yourself in the world. And I led with that. The dossier was deeply personal, very different. And it wasn't, I'm going to use the word sterile, but I don't mean that in a way to dismiss an approach to the construction of a dossier and kind of allowing the work to speak for itself. It had a lot of contextualization, so much contextualization that I do remember one of the external reviewers saying, "I want to read more." And I was like, "Ooh, how much more?" Because it was at that time like 38 pages, and I had well exceeded the the required page length. I superseded that. I would like to read more. So yeah, I also I gave some names, of people who could again be objective, arm's length as required, people that we hadn't done any work together. And I had a different chair at the time that I did when I was moving through, the ranks of becoming an associate. And so they identified who they were going to bring, and the letters were just really robust and really supportive. And again, somebody wanted to read a lot more than what I had already given. And so, the preparation is, first of all, make sure that, the folks that you submit, whose names you submit for consideration, actually meet the guidelines of the university. And the provost and the dean, they said the provost sets those guidelines, the dean follows those guidelines, as does the department. So make sure you do that. But I think, what I would say to you and what I would say to anybody else is there is a reason why I deeply exceeded the guideline in terms of page length. In my case, but when you're preparing that file, make sure that it has all of the requirements. The table of contents, matches the contents of the document. Your attention to detail, I think, is critical, but I think external reviewers appreciate context. I know mine did. It might not need to have been 25 extra pages of context, but I do think your reviewers appreciate context, how you bring everything together. Like, what is the vision under which you are bringing all of your activities in research, teaching, and service together? And because I was able to articulate that, what I have started doing now in my mentorship of junior faculty is to say, start formulating the vision that you have for your career now. Then that is going to guide you as you move to each level.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And so as you're on that process, right, that 10 external review process, how did you find it's a fine line on who you're going to offer as someone as an external reviewer, because as you articulated, you can't have worked closely together, right? There has to be an arm's length. So how do you find the person that you trust will look at things from a non-biased perspective, but also, be your advocate in that room, but also does not have an extensive knowledge of you personally, and maybe not even your work? How do you, what is the metric of that? How do you guide that?
Well, so arm's length generally is we've not published together, right? Like, you have not, in the case, you've not hired me to come, perform in a show that you're directing.
Okay. Okay.
Right. But there is an expectation that, Jeremy and I are members of the Association for Theater and Higher Education. I've heard Jeremy's work at conferences, right? I've watched some of Jeremy's performances. I've read publications of Jeremy. I'm aware of this individual. If you and I are teaching similar courses, generally when you hear from, a dean or a provost about serving as an external reviewer, it is because there is some similarity in the profile, because you can provide context to how this candidate's work
Gotcha.
sits in the field.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I do have to know you or know of what you're doing, to give some context for what it is that you're doing. It is just that perhaps I should not have been in a show,
Right.
right? That you are directing, and there's been compensation, or again, we're publishing together. Then we start to lose a bit of the objectivity. So yes.
Okay.
But the
That's
metric
good. Thank you for that.
is who knows the field, who best knows what it is that you're doing in the tradition, right?
Mm-hmm,
From which it comes.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I want to shift. I want to stay in the same field, but shift our focus a little bit to navigating institutional politics and cultural realities. So it sounded, I had to do some subtext in your tenure process, and the reason you wrote 28 extra pages, but I don't want to project that onto you. So I want to open this up, you to talk about what it has been like for you as a Black faculty member at a PWI navigating the tenure process.
Yeah, I'm grateful for those that have come before and shown the way. Uh, and so everything that I have accomplished could not have been accomplished without those who tilled the ground on which I stand. So I came into an institution, and specifically a position that had been occupied by, I think, maybe 5 other faculty members before me. I was number 6 in the position that I have.
Mm-hmm.
And we have another Black faculty member here in dance who had been here before me. And so I didn't come in unaware of the circumstances, the history. I'm also a student, a graduate of William and Mary, right? And so I also had a perspective as a student, and I was cursorily involved in the theater department as a student. So I brought both a gift of knowledge with me, an openness to not be bound by the ghosts of the past, and a willingness to do the work and build on the legacy. And so my commitment to building on the legacy is bigger than the strain and the difficulty that comes from navigating the cultural politics of being Black at a PWI. Yeah, my
So
commitment to building on the legacy is just bigger than that.
so I'm a peer just a little bit deeper into that. Were there specific challenges related to, or were there biases or isolations? And how did you manage that?
Yes, there were, specific challenges. Yes, there is indeed a bit of isolation. The beautiful thing is, I don't think I've experienced anything more or maybe different than what you or anybody else could be experiencing at another institution. What I will say is, I'm gonna focus on the strategies, right?
There we go.
And so the family, for sure. When I came here, I chose to live about 30 miles away, and I'm next door to my mom. right?
Okay.
My best friends, both of whom graduated from the institution, they also live in the area. I came into, it wasn't exactly a um uh, uh what's the word I'm looking for, and I can't think of it right now. I came into a bit of a cohort in terms of hiring, but that's not the word I'm looking for. And one of my closest colleagues, she was hired at the same time that I was hired, and we have a lot of similarities. And so we call ourselves academic Ibiji, right? We're twins. Um, and she and I are able to lean into one another to navigate some of the things that we have been navigating. And staying active in the field, you're attending your, national association conferences, so that you can be with your colleagues and build community across the individual academic lines, I think was really helpful. And mentors, having folks who have navigated the system that you have to navigate. So having one or two trusted individuals at your current institution is really helpful. And of course, having a network of folk beyond your institution is really helpful. And as I said earlier, making sure that you are communicative, that you write things down, that you keep receipts, that you have meetings when you need to have meetings, that you follow the chain of command, but don't be afraid of a good CC or a BCC. And again, make sure that you have a relationship with your dean and your provost.
So at a larger institution, at UK, it's a little hard to have a direct contact with the provost of this school, just the sheer scale and number. What do you recommend there in that process if the provost is not readily accessible?
And so at a downtime within the academic year, which might be, closer to the beginning of the summer point, right before people are about to go away for, their vacation, and certainly before the fall semester begins. If there are particular points of reflection with solutions, because the provosts typically are solution oriented, that's when I would ask for a meeting.
Okay.
And making a lunch meeting, involve food if you can, or beverage, coffee, tea, smoothie.
How did you go about being seen
when you go about those particular meetings at that level, come with solutions.
Come with solutions. That's it.
Yes.
Come with solutions. That's really good.
Mm-hmm.
Was this a part of your strategy as being seen as a leader within your department? Or was it in conjunction with other strategies to being seen as a leader? Because you're a double minority, Black and you're a woman.
Indeed.
So go ahead.
So becoming a program director, when I became a program director, was and having that joint appointment, which made that directorship possible, was how I was able to move through different leadership opportunities at William and Mary. I was always interested in administration within higher ed, and when I became full, began to pursue that more, vigorously. I attended all of the professional development opportunities that were available within the institution. So mid-level, there was one offered through the Studio for Teaching and Learning Innovation. We've had several. All of them I've attended, right? And so different people are in the room, and each one comes with an opportunity to, talk about how you would address a particular, like what's your intervention for addressing something particular, meeting a need of an institution. And so through your own engagement of professional development, you then begin to introduce yourself to other campus leaders. So they see your interest in leadership. They think of you when leadership opportunities arise. And so that's how I've, navigated, what it means to begin to emerge as a leader on your campus. And again, what are you interested in, right? What do you care about? Right. And so you're showing up in those meetings. I actually go to the your general art and science faculty meetings. Sometimes faculty can't go because, they're teaching, they may have family commitments, whatever. But I do my best to attend as many of those general body faculty meetings as possible, because you get to learn more about the academic enterprise, the issues that are percolating within, art and sciences, and the case of you and I, that's where we are. And then if you have an opportunity to attend board of visitors meetings, I attend those when my schedule allows as well. They are really informative, and you get to hear about what's important to, those who are governing the institution at a different level, and how your work might be in conversation, the work that you're doing individually or the work that your unit is doing, and how it may be in conversation with that. So leadership doesn't always have to happen within your department, right? If there's an opportunity to serve within your department so that your colleagues get to know who you are, and what you care about, and you're also about the business of uplifting the mission and the vision of the unit that you consider your home, that's important. Get involved. But don't think you have to limit your leadership to just that.
Right.
As an assistant professor, you might, in terms of the distribution of your effort, think about that as well, right? But again, I always want to take a person back to the vision. What is it that you're trying to achieve through the work that you do at your institution? And if serving on a committee and you're jointly appointed in another unit will allow you to do that, if being on, an elected committee or even an appointed committee will allow you to do that, and everybody's going to be better because of it, then, get involved. And it won't feel laborious, right? It won't feel like, oh, I got another meeting. No, it's because you're doing something that you're really passionate about.
Yeah, I could talk to you all day. I have a bevy of questions for you, but I don't want to hold your time. I know you have things that you need to do, but I would love to pick up part 2 of this conversation, because I'd love to hear about your personal growth, long-term career development, and then just your own reflections. So, but this has been great. It's been edifying for me. I hope that assistant professors, associate professors, everyone involved in the tenure process can glean some knowledge from what we've talked about today.
Indeed. Thank you very much for this opportunity, Jeremy. And we will have a part 2, and we'll pick up because you have a lot of great questions. And I want to make sure that we are able to have a conversation about that. So we will circle back at another time. I want to thank those of you who are going to watch Transitions in Leadership on the replay. Thank you for your time. And we look forward to continuing to serve you in the future. Have a good one.